Hey everyone, before we start, sorry if you've already seen this plug before, but I'll keep it brief. I'm currently campaigning to win this year's Face of Horror competition, and it's a big elimination night tonight, so I need your votes. There's more details on what this is all about at the end of the video if you want that, but just for now, so as to not hold things up, I'll just say please vote for me at the link in the description and in the pinned comment. It's free, you can do it once a day, and with you lovely lot behind me, I might stand a chance of winning. Anyway, on to the video. If you're anything like me, you've probably experienced a great deal of MCU fatigue lately. There just seems to be so many elements to it now. Not only is it hard to keep up with, it's kinda hard to care. I don't want to sour anyone sweet, and I know for a fact this massive media franchise still has legions and legions of fans, and if that's you, more power to you. But the way I personally feel about it is just burnt out. I would never have called myself a huge fan, but there was certainly a decent level of excitement I used to have for this stuff. I'd attend midnight screenings, I'd see every film, and while I didn't heap adoration onto all of the movies within this densely packed interwoven narrative, there was more than a couple of titles I could honestly say I absolutely adored. Recently though, the gaps between those high points have gotten longer for me, even though there's more MCU to go around than ever before. You've got multiple movies a year, you've got multiple TV shows and one-shots. The amount of hours of content Disney and Marvel Studios are pumping out into this fictional world has skyrocketed. And while I'm not under any illusions that things like the old fictional news broadcast that takes place within this universe is some deeply essential viewing, I do think the whole thing has kind of become oversaturated and just such a massive commitment. Especially when these stories in question are just not personally quite capturing my imagination. I don't know if it's just that there's too much of it to feel fresh anymore, but WandaVision is the only one of the TV shows I end up actually watching with any regularity. I've tried some of the others and they're fine. I'll probably get around to finishing them at some point, they're just not a priority. And even with the films, which are way less of a time sink, I'm finding myself drifting away from them. Where once I'd watch them on launch day or opening weekend, it's now more of a, oh, it's leaving cinemas soon, I should probably catch that kind of vibe. And the thing is, even if there wasn't just absolutely loads of it, it all feels, at least to me, a little bit meandering and directionless right now. There's not really the clear divide in tone anymore between the TV shows and movies like when Netflix was outputting them, because now they're all under the more controlled Disney umbrella. Everything seems to exist to serve this specific branding and feel they have in mind. The plots, settings and characters might be different, but it all has the same feel, it all has the same comic delivery, it all has the same pacing and similar stakes. And that's a criticism a lot of people have had with this stuff for years, it's nothing new, but it didn't feel quite so egregious to me when there was a clear goal they were building to in mind. That being the whole narrative around the Infinity Stones, the big bad villain of Thanos, and the box office shattering payoff of Endgame. There was always a clear reason to care, a clear reason to be invested, but once your biggest, baddest, world-changing, death-bringing threat has been all wrapped up, where do you go from there? How do you raise the stakes after that? Well, it turns out if your sole goal is to entertain me specifically, you do not. You lower them. While all the current Marvel movies and TV shows, generally speaking, have their huge scopes with threats coming from the likes of reality-altering witches, Egyptian goddess cults, multiverse-bending magic spells, and whatever happened in Hawkeye, I don't know, I didn't watch that one. Marvel recently, in a manner that I consider to be fairly low-key for them and seemingly without the typical fanfare associated with their output, dropped a small-scale little picture just in time for Halloween called Werewolf by Night. And it's the most excited I have been for anything Marvel has done in a good while. Werewolf by Night is not the MCU at its very best, but it is it at some of its most interesting. At least the most interesting it has been in what feels like a long time. This little 50 minutes-ish special represents something I think had been really missing from the MCU as of late. A totally standalone story that, while set within the universe, does not also double as an advertisement for some connected licensed property, and is also just an out-and-out genre pick. Werewolf by Night might be technically linked with the biggest superhero franchise of all time, and I'm sure if you look hard enough there'll be some Easter eggs and references to other properties in there somewhere that I missed, but overall, it does not remotely feel like a superhero effort. Everything from its plot, its tone, its presentation feels both completely at odds with the MCU branding, and yet, as a result of feeling so fresh within this fictional reality, extremely complementary to it. Werewolf by Night takes on the form not of an explosive, high-stakes action-adventure, but as a black and white moody pastiche of the kind of 1930s horror made famous by Universal through the likes of classic films such as Dracula, Frankenstein, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's both an aesthetic tribute to the monsters of a long gone era, as well as a delightfully fun time in its own right. This film, TV special presentation, I'm not really sure what to call it, but the Academy recognises anything 40 minutes and up as a feature film, so solely for the sake of ease I'm just going to say film from here on out. This film is based on the comic series and character of the same name and follows protagonist Jack Russell, who, and I looked this up, is apparently not intentionally named after the dog breed, but he is part of a kind of secret community of monster hunters. When the most accomplished of this society, a Mr. Ulysses Bloodstone, dies, his widow Verussa summons a group of monster hunters, including Jack, to compete for Ulysses' prized monster hunting tool, the Bloodstone, which Jack can only assume he named after himself like a right little narcissist. The Bloodstone gives its wielder powers over the monsters they fight, as it can weaken and hurt them, but the prize can't be passed on to just anybody. Rather, Verussa has organised a hunt in the Manor's maze with a particularly fearsome creature. The monster hunters and Ulysses' estranged and somewhat unwelcome daughter, who also shows up for the festivities, must enter the maze, slay the beast, and possibly each other, and the winner who receives the bounty will be whoever is first to grab hold of the prize from their fallen enemy. And all the while this is going on, our protagonist Mr. Russell, it turns out, may have an ulterior motive for being there, and he may also be harbouring a dark secret that, considering his company, could put both him and them in danger. Gee, I wonder whatever it could be. Before anyone gets on me for spoiling something here, it's literally the premise of the film. Like, come on, it's in the title, don't at me. Directed by Michael Giacchino, a man who was known far more for his audio work than visual work, being an Oscar, Emmy, and Grammy award-winning film composer, Werewolf by Night marks Michael's first foray into a large-scale project as the dude behind the camera rather than in the recording booth, having only previously directed and released a short film and a short web special. Despite this particular role not being where his expertise traditionally lies, I'm very glad the guy made the decision to sit in the director's seat for this one, because whether it's from a lifelong love of classic horror, from his experience in the film industry, or from learning from the many peers he has connected with along his journey, the man is clearly skilled in this position. Werewolf by Night is easily Marvel at its most atmospheric and moody. The sets have this elaborate and evocative coldness to them. The black and white stone labyrinth the film is mostly set inside of immediately sprung to mind thoughts of when Bela Lugosi first ascended the stairs of that gothic Transylvanian castle back in 1931. The way shots are composed with these tone-setting, well-contrasted, shadowy wides with slow creeping movement and punctuated by quick expressive close-ups on action and drama creates this vivid, almost gothic aesthetic that doesn't just wear its influences on its shoulder, but clearly understands what made those influences so visually interesting and appealing to audiences. The style doesn't just begin and end with the monochrome cinematography and call it a day either. All of the little touches you'd associate with the time period they're homaging are clearly replicated. There's film grain and burns laid over the picture in a manner that's redolent of the classics without being overbearing. The musical score, also created by Giacchino, is heavy on piano, choir, and sharp violin strings rather than the brassy orchestral fanfare Marvel Studios is more known for. There's a creepy opening narrator, an old-school title card, a barrage of practical effects. On top of that, it's also surprisingly gory for an MCU title, and does not shy away from throwing blood up on the screen, which is actually one of the things that sets it apart from its classical influences, in that they were mostly goreless affairs. But seeing this still feels extremely fresh from this studio's usual output, and only serves to increase the horror vibes and give it an identity all its own, separate even from its clear inspirations, while not feeling totally at odds with its otherwise heavily borrowed aesthetics. It's all really finely tuned and the individual parts work seamlessly together to create an exceptional atmosphere that runs all the way through from opening titles to end credits. These creative choices don't feel like just a gimmick either. They serve the plot and world perfectly. Sure, they could have made a film about monster hunters and werewolves and stone manor mazes without all of this style, but doesn't this feel much more in line with the story they're telling? Classic moody horror visuals to serve a classic moody horror narrative feels so much more correct. The narrative and aesthetic actively complement and hold each other up. The filmmakers use this style not just as a unique hook, but to excellent effect to enhance the storytelling. A great example would be during the transformation scene. A standard Hollywood or horror film would probably have a big transformation depicted in fully rendered and intricate CG, or in some cases linger on gory practical effects. And that's totally fine and appropriate for those movies. But Giacchino here knows that's not how it goes down for this particular style. And instead, this film's transformation is shown not through explicit detail, but through shadows. The flashing light casting Jack's striking silhouette in a near perfect black on the stone walls. Our only hint of what disturbing change is happening out of frame coming through this after image of his twisted, contorted shape and the slow track towards the horror in the eyes of the character looking on. Yes! Love that. Chef's kiss level work. Mwah! Speaking of that character's expression of horror actually, the film has some great performances too, particularly from its two leads of Gael Garcia Bernal as Jack and Laura Donnelly as Elsa Bloodstone, who have a likeable and bouncy chemistry that makes the whole thing fly by. And although I do want to praise the breezy experience of watching them both on this more miniature than usual adventure, this does unfortunately bring me to my main criticism with the whole film. It does fly by. And half of that is because it's good, stylish and engaging fun, but the other half is because it's just 50 minutes. I rarely ever make this complaint about movies, but I genuinely think this might be too short. It's not the length I mind per se. I've seen plenty of films far shorter than this that I think are out and out masterpieces. It's just that for this particular plot and these particular characters, I don't think they really get room to develop and breathe. The story doesn't really get a chance to take off. There's definitely some theme in there about the humanity of what we perceive to be monsters, but there's not enough time to flesh out these concepts or say anything meaningful. And so what we're left with is a plot that, while certainly eventful and containing characters that are appropriately likeable or loathable, still manages to be the component that falls short of the rest of the film's greatness. It's not completely without merit, of course. For one thing, I absolutely love that you don't have to do any homework for it. There's not several movies of backstory or a major tie-in series that's key to understanding its narrative. It's just a good, solid, standalone tale. But that's all it is, narratively speaking. Solid. Just solid. Nothing that's going to light your world on fire, but nothing that's going to offend either. Just an enjoyable 50 minutes that, if I'm completely honest, might register as unremarkable were it not elevated by its stringent adherence to its complementary visual style and tone. But at the end of the day, it is elevated by those things, and you have to look at it as the sum of its parts. And taken as a whole, with this well-executed style, this attention to detail, and this fantastic atmosphere, it ends up being such a great and wholly unexpected Halloween treat. And I'd love Marvel to do more off-the-wall genre experiments with their characters like this. I'm really excited to see what Giacchino does next, and I think he's going to prove to be quite the accomplished director in the years to come. After all, if my main criticism of his first big project mostly revolves around wanting more of it, then clearly he's doing something right for me. And Marvel, if you can keep doing these unconventional genre pitches, especially within the horror genre, then you'll absolutely make me a massive fan again. Flesh this stuff out and give me a truly out of left field theatrical release, and I swear, I will be first in line for a ticket. Speaking of celebrating horror though, yes, I'm using the exact same segue as last time, now the main video is over, I'd like to remind everyone that I'm campaigning to win the new Face of Horror competition, and I'm shockingly so far doing actually pretty good and may have a shot of winning. Hard to say, but I'd love it if you guys could all support me with your votes. At the time of this writing, I'm in the deciding group finalist stage, and I'm jumping between first and second place constantly, which is nail-biting, as elimination happens tonight. And only the current first place will go into a new round to face all the other group winners, so I really need your help. If you've enjoyed this video or anything I've ever done on this channel, please vote for me daily, and especially right now to save me from elimination, and I will love you forever. You can vote for me once or twice for free every day, or if you're so inclined, buy more votes with a charity donation to the B+ Foundation, who are the largest providers of financial assistance to families dealing with pediatric cancer. To vote for me, just click the link in the description and follow the instructions. It'll only take you a minute, and if I was able to win this thing, it could be really huge for me, and I cannot stress how much I'd appreciate it. Every bit of help is welcome. The competition still has some rounds to go and runs all the way through to November 10th, so please vote daily if you can for as long as I'm in this thing, and especially right now because depending on when you're watching this, I may be up for elimination. Thank you all so much, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all next video.